Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this guide I'm going to show you how to take a settlement design you've already got and easily break it into chunks to use with the Workshop Framework layout system. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is take a full export of your settlement before you do anything to it. So we're going to go ahead and start that now. Basically the same way I've shown in the other tutorials for doing this, you're just going to walk right up, hit export layout before you do anything else to your settlement. You're also going to want to probably make yourself a save at the exact moment after or before you start the export, probably before, just because like any other big script event in Fallout 4, there's always a risk of crashing. So you want to be aware of that. Now, it's pretty unlikely because we've tested this code backward and forward, but better not risk it when you're talking about a design that you've put a lot of effort into. So I would say right before once you've gone through, done your inspection, you're sure it's the layout you want to work with or the settlement you want to work with, make yourself a fresh save and then go ahead and start that export. All right, so after you've finished your export, what I recommend you do is rename the file that gets created and move it to some other folder because you're going to need this. So I've already done that. I grabbed the export file, I've renamed it Sanctuary Mega Build Full because you're going to want to reuse that again in a little bit here. So the next step is to start scrapping parts of your settlement. And what we're going to do is basically scrap all of the parts of this design that we want to be its own layout. Then we're going to take another export, and when we have a differential tool on our website that when it compares two of these export files, it will create a new export that's just the items that were missing in the second one. So effectively, we can scrap everything and then generate a new file that looks as if we created a save file that only had those items in it. And then there's one more step after that, and I'll walk you through that. But basically, the cool part about this is you can be a little bit sloppy with this because this is only the first step. There's one more step after we do this secondary export. So if you over scrap, if you grab a few too many things, you scrap some vanilla things, it's not the end of the world because there's still another step in here where you'll have one more opportunity to clean up the actual items that are going to end up in the individual layout for this chunk. So if for this case, let's say I want to do, and see, it doesn't even matter if I grab that by accident. Like, let's say I want to do a version of my settlement here. I want a layout. I want one chunk of it that players can choose to build to just be everything about this player home. I want this front yard area, everything that's inside the player's house, my little storage area there and workshop area. I want all of that to be part of one of my layouts. Well, basically I'm going to go through and scrap all this. And then we're going to jump onto the web tool and I'll show you what to do next. So go ahead in your own build, pick a chunk that you want to be, scrap everything. And then as soon as you're done, go over and create another export and I will meet you right back here. All right, so I wanted to interject with one other idea that could be helpful in the long term of before you're actually doing your exports, after you've got everything scrapped. So right now I've got all my player home stuff scrapped, is to make yourself a save file and use a number in it. And the reason for this number will become more apparent as we get further into this process. But basically what I'm going to do is each time I create a new one of these save files with another chunk destroyed, I'm going to increment that number. So you can see down here, I'm about to save with console. I'm going to do save sank breakdown _ 01 _ player home scrapped. So basically what I'm going to be doing is this one will be 01, and the next one, say I do the walls around the settlement, will become 02, etc. And that will become incredibly valuable later when we're starting to do the final process of getting these things prepped for release. So you don't have to do this. This is just my method of organization, but you'll see why I've chosen this method when we get through the full process. So now that I've made this save file, I'm hitting enter here. And note, if you're doing console saves, if you've never done it before, make sure you are out of workshop mode or it will appear to work, but it won't actually. I won't give you an error or anything. And actually, I gotta have my mouse back in here. There we go. So if you hit save like that, or if you type save space the name of something and you're in workshop mode, it just won't do anything, but you won't get a warning. So then we're gonna come back over here and we're gonna export a second layout here. So we'll go ahead and get that started. Okay, now that we've got our second log file, we're going to use the same idea with the renaming. So we're going to take our little file here and we're going to rename it again with a number in it, just like we did with that save file. So I'm going to do 01 player house scrapped. And actually I should include the sanctuary. And again, you guys can use whatever whatever naming scheme you want. But the one thing that's really important with this is that you know what order you did with them in. Now, one of the ways you can do that is just with the date stamp. That might be enough for you guys. Personally, I never trust those because I'm always copying and pasting files all over, and the modified dates can get all screwy. So I just like to make sure it's in the file name. But the key is you need to know what order you're doing these in, because once we go through the differential process, you're always going to be differentiating one from the one you did right before it, assuming that you're going to do what I'm about to show you, which is now that we've done this one, now we're going to continue from here. We're not going to go back to that full save. So we're going to go pick up right from here and continue to scrap off our sections. And the reason that we want to do that is to make sure that in all of our collection of layouts, the full settlement is available. Now, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to do a little chunk, and then you don't have to follow this. But the idea with this particular guide is to show you how you could chunk out an entire settlement. And so one of the other ways you could do this instead of this numerical method I'm showing you is instead you could just keep going back to your full save, scrapping another piece, and then differentiating off of the full settlement. But my goal with this particular video is to show you how you could take a settlement and chunk it out entirely. So let's say for the next one, my goal is I'm going to get rid of all of the outer walls and defenses, and we're going to call that another chunk of the layout. So I will start doing that, and then we'll go ahead and create that save. And then once we have these two, I'll probably then show you guys the rest of the process. I think you guys will get the idea here of what I'm trying to show you, and I'll show you the web tool next and how you take all these files and bring them together, and then we'll do the last steps where you get one more chance to clean things up a little bit. Okay, so now we've got our exports. We've got our full export. We've got our first one where we scrap the player home, and then we've got our second one where we proceeded in that same save to scrap our defenses. So we're going to head to the web tool here, the layout creator at simsettlements.com/tools/layoutcreator.php, and we're going to click on this create differential button, and that's going to bring up this little tool. And what this tool does is it will take the first file, which in our case is the full build. Then it will take our second file, which is in this case the player house scrapped, and it's going to create a new file that is anything that was found in the first file but wasn't found in the second file. And since the only thing missing from our second file are the things we scrapped, it effectively creates a new blueprint that's just the items that we wanted, which is absolutely perfect. So we're gonna hit create differential here, and this will generate a new text file. Don't mind all the files that have been created. I did a lot of off-camera testing to make sure that there weren't any flaws in my workflow here. But now I'm gonna go ahead and rename this. For the same reason I kept renaming the files throughout, is that we're dealing with so many files, I just don't want to mix them up and then have to redo a bunch of work. So I'm gonna call this one Sanctuary Mega Build Player Home Only. So now this is, instead of scrapped, this is our player home only. Now notice that it's a .text file. The extensions for the files are important because they determine how the web tool will process them. Rather than bothering with things like header data in them, I just used the file extension, mostly because I didn't want to risk differentiating for transfer settlements blueprints. I didn't want to create any situation where transfer settlements tools that the community has designed wouldn't work with some of these files. So I just did it by extension. So .log and uploaded to here is considered a workshop framework export. .text is considered a differential, and .json is considered a transfer settlements blueprint. So don't mess with the file extensions on these. So we're going to go ahead and grab this guy and pop it in here. And the reason that it matters is because the backend code that generates the plugin has to start at a different step depending on where the file came from. So these differentials, it can actually start later in the process because it's already done some of the early work, and then like the logs or the transfer settlements blueprint, it has to do different sets of work on those. So back little technical info on that. All right, so now this player home only is effectively good enough to where it could be used in this tool. We could drop it in, create a layout, and pass it out to players, and it would work. Now there's one little flaw with that, well, two technically. So one is you haven't gotten that opportunity to make that second pass yet, to make some tweaks and adjustments. The second problem is, if you followed all of the other videos I've done on this system, is that Workshop Framework uses something called scrap profiling, where it records what you scrapped so that it can repeat that for the player. So that way they have an exact replica of what you did in your settlement. Well, the problem right now is that the scrap profile data that is stored in this is based on our full build. So that is obviously a problem. We want, if the player is going to use our layout plus a couple other people's layouts in their same settlement, they're going to want scrap profile data just based on what happened in that settlement. And that's what we're going to do next. So what we're going to do here is we're going to drag our little player home only. And actually, before I do that, I do want to show for creating the secondary differential. So it is the thing you would do differently is your base export would then become the file before it. So then it would become 01 subtracts 02. And that's because we continued from that same save file. Is that if we did 02 from the original full build, it would include the difference would include the player house and the defenses, because all of those were scrapped at the time we took this export. But because we kept each of these files, we can just keep cascading down the line, just shifting them the next one in, and then it will correctly generate the file that only has those pieces in it. So player house scrapped had the player house missing. So then when we subtract defenses from it, the player house won't be there. So it's not going to end up in our differential. I hope that makes sense. But basically just follow that logic of just go down the line. If you have 10 of these, do subtract 01 from 02, or 02 from 01, 03 from 02. And what I mean by subtract is, so we're going to put 1 in here in the top box, 2 in the second box, hit create differential. There's our, that's going to be our defenses only. Then if we had a third one, we would put 2 in this first box, and then we'd put number 3 in the second one, create differential, and just repeat that process. And each time you're generating a differential that has just the objects you scrapped from that particular thing. And I'm going to go ahead and just take care of this now before I forget. Sanctuary mega build. Let's see, defenses only. And we'll go ahead and copy that in there because I am actually going to make this a releasable plugin. So then we're going to go back in here. So now we're going to do our little second pass. So we're going to just drag this in here, and I'm going to just name this player. We're going to name it that player home cleanup. And then we're going to go down to advanced options here, and we're going to exclude all this data, and we don't need it. And one is we don't want, the goal here is we're going to go into game and rebuild this on a fresh version of the settlement, and we don't want anything scrapped. We're going to go in and manually clean up the scrap ourselves, and then that way we can take another export, and that final version will be the quintessential version. It will be like we had a save file where all we did was built that one little chunk, and it will be a perfect layout that will have all the correct scrap profile data. And I'm sure you got, some of you can just end the video from here. You know exactly what I'm getting at. You get it. But I'm going to go ahead and finish the process, and I'll walk in game and show you guys roughly what I mean. But we're going to exclude that data, and we don't need the vanilla objects because we're going to load this into a clean save that's never been touched. All of the items are going to be there already anyway. So the next step of this process is you are going to need some sort of clean save. You're going to need to be at the same settlement, but have it untouched. So I like to keep a save that has all of the settlements unlocked on my computer. You can probably find one of those on Nexus. It's just important that nothing has been scrapped yet if you want this to work correctly. So go find one of those on Nexus, or if you can't find a good one, there's plenty of clean saves that are at the vault where you could just exit the vault, use the console command TMM, like Mary 1, to unveil all the map markers, and then just fast travel to it. And the workshop framework code has a claim this workshop option in the tools menu. So if you go into MCM, go to tools, you can claim any workshop without having to do any quests or anything. So you can get instant access to it again. So basically we're going to come down here, hit file options. I'm going to name this, I'll use one of these, and we're going to create ourselves our file. And you just drop that into your data folder, and as a normal mod, load it up with your mod loader or your mod manager. And I'll meet you in game, head into your settlement that's cleaned up, and we'll continue from there. Okay, so we're now back in game. We're in a clean copy of Sanctuary. Now, one thing I know that I screwed up in this particular clean save, but it's fine, and it's good enough for this demonstration, is movable objects are often a problem for the scrap profile. I was very uncareful, and I knocked tires all over the place. I know some of these were knocked over, but I think this was the one I bumped way out of place, maybe that kickball. So if you want yours to be perfect, just be careful when you're walking watch for movable objects, because if they're not in the exact same position as they were in the base game, then they will not get picked up correctly in the scrap profile system. So now we're going to go over here. We're going to hit manage and settlement layout, and we're going to build a layout this time. And we're going to find our layout. So there's our player home cleanup, and we're going to hit use. Now in this, we're going to, just in case you forget to hit that advanced option, if you just hit it, build it, but skip any scrapping, you won't have to worry about it accidentally scrapping too much. But it's going to quickly build up your section of the layout that you scrapped earlier. And so you should have a perfect replica of that shortly. Now, if you're using sim settlements and you have any of our what we call generally blue man markers, those city marker objects, those will disappear correctly as soon as you enter workshop mode. If you're using any plots, it will take a little while for all of the items to appear on it. It can take quite a while if you have a lot of them. I have in this mega build of Sanctuary, I have over 100 plots. It takes several hours to seed them all. That is an unfortunate part. of the SimSettlements code base is it's so old that there's a lot of repeated work going on from the Band-Aid patches. It all works eventually, but it is a little slow. So keep that in mind. If you find that to be the case and you're doing this process, you might need to walk away. But for most builds like this, I have no SimSettlements plots. There's nothing slowing me down. It builds in 11 seconds and then it's done. So I can get right to work on this. So what you're going to want to do then is go ahead and pop back into workshop mode and wander around and inspect your build and look for anything that's intersecting, things that you want to get rid of now. You could also take this opportunity to add any more tweaks. So if there's anything additional you wanted to add that you didn't get around to, but I'm going to come in here and I'm going to see. So I had added this full floor in here. So some of the original items are kind of sunk in. These things are clipping, and just clean it up. Basically, you're redoing the scrapping portion to make sure that your build is perfect. So we're going to go ahead and this is your chance to get that one last overview of your settlement. Now, like I said, this is extra work and some of you might not want to do this, and I understand. But if you're a perfectionist like me, then this to me is just worth a little bit of extra effort to go in and scrap, especially because each of these sections is relatively small, so it's not going to take a ton of time to do this. I'm just going to give it kind of a once over, and usually before I release anything, I want to do this sort of thing anyway, in the sense of going and looking at what the player's going to see and make sure it doesn't look awful. So poking my head, like, see, I've got some things clipping over here. This all looks decent enough. Oh, this is no good. Let's get rid of, that one. And then again, you don't have to be perfect here. Whoops. Well, that lamp is going to be screwed up on my profile. Again, watch out for movable objects. Those are a problem with this sort of thing. But just kind of poke around your head to the part of layout. This is your opportunity to clean up. You don't have to do this. Again, you could just use that differential and get to work on it, and that would totally work fine. You would just run into an issue that you would have interfering scrap profiles with anybody else. But I imagine that not as many people are as careful with the scrapping as I am, so it might not be a big deal. But for me, I really care about how things get scrapped, so this is important to me. If it's not important to you, or if you if you scrap everything before you start, well, then this step is completely useless to you anyway. So I find this is just going to be one of those things that's mostly going to be beneficial for the player, because it gives them maximum freedom. And let's see here. Let's place you out of the way. It's going to give them the chance to use as many different layouts without conflicts on the scrap profiling. So and I guess apparently usually when this happens, when you can't set a thing on the floor correctly, it means it doesn't have a nav mesh set up. So we'll just go ahead and use our little place. Oh, I don't have place everywhere enabled right now for some reason. But anyway, I think you guys get the point. So once you've got it in a spot you're comfortable, you go ahead and export it again. And now, if you think about it, this is effectively a save file that looks like all you did in it was built this one chunk of the settlement. So now you can export this out and go back into that tool and build your layout properly. And you can do multiple. So you could go through, do this for each of them, export each one, and now this is your final layout. It's ready for delivery. So when it creates its scrap profile data, it's only going to be the things you scrapped in this exact session. So now when I'm done with this, I will save this file as, so I'll just do that now so I remember. We're going to call this sync. We'll call it player house only. And now I have this save file. Anytime I want to come back and make tweaks to it, I can. Or if something goes wrong during the export, I have a save I can jump back to. And I know that this guy is good to go and perfect. And yeah, I would highly recommend you guys keep yourselves a good naming scheme so you're not redoing work if you run into problems, or if it just takes you a few times to get used to this process. Again, another thing you could be doing here is you could add more items here. Because this build is now completely independent, when you export and make layouts for it, you are good to go. So I'm going to do this one, then I'm going to go back to my clean save. So then I'm going to go back into my empty save, and I'll repeat the process for my defenses. So then the next save I have will only have the defenses in it, and it'll be a completely clean settlement with just those. And then I can finish cleaning it up, look for anything vanilla that's intersecting, see if there's any tweaks I want to make, anything I want to add, and then go ahead and export that again. And then you can go to the web tool here. All right, so now you have got all of your export files. You've created plugins, you've launched them in the game, you've cleaned them up a little bit, taken care of anything you wanted to make sure got scrapped, added in anything extra that you wanted to put in there. For example, one of the things I like to do is go through and make sure everything in a little tiny layout section is all wired to itself, so it's easy for the player then to wire multiple layouts together later if they decide to mix and match layouts for the front of yours or between yours and other designers, that then they will only have to connect generally one wire. That's just something I like to do. It's not necessary. But what I would recommend you do when you get to that final step, first of all, is test it. Go in game, make sure it works the way you expect. And I would also, when you go to set up your your settings, you're going to fill out these 3 fields here. You're going to set up your file, and under advanced options, I would exclude vanilla objects. You want to keep your scrap profile because you set that up, but the reason you want to exclude vanilla objects is because in the same reason that you didn't want to use the scrap profile from your full build on all of your smaller ones, is that if you keep the vanilla objects in, the actual vanilla objects it's going to be looking for are going to be all of the items that you didn't scrap in that smaller build. So you do not want your vanilla objects in your smaller layouts. You only want the scrap profile. And then if you test it, so if you were to go into a settlement and use the scrap all command, for example, the console command scrap all, and then test your layout, if you find that there are missing items because you excluded this, to fix that, what you do is you go into your save, and there's a couple of ways you can fix this. If you have a mod like Workshop Plus, you can just grab those items and clone them. So for example, if we go into game here and let me head into here. So let's say, for example, that I really want this couch to end up there no matter what, whether or not the player has scrapped it or not. What I could do is hotkey in Workshop Plus. I could hotkey the clone tool. So if we go in here, Workshop Plus, and then hotkeys, and then clone. Okay, I've already got it hotkeyed. So we could grab onto this, push my hotkey, and then pull aside. It's going to be there, and then we scrap that. And now this version here is a version I placed. It's going to not show up as a vanilla item, and you can confirm that by clicking on it, and you can see that it has FF as the first 2 letters. That means that it's something that you, the player, placed. Then if you re-export, that will get included as just your items that you built in your design. So if you find any vanilla items like that that you absolutely need in your design and you want to make sure they work even for players who hit scrap all, that is the way you do that. So at the end of the day, you're going to have all of your different final layouts. You can just set up one of these little sets of just filling in these 3 boxes, upload your blueprint, check in this exclude vanilla objects, and then hit add another layout, and then repeat the process for all of your little settlement chunks. And then finally, you'll go down to file options and set up your file name and your mod author name, etc. And then you create most likely you'll create an ESL file, and it's good for release. So guys, I hope this gets you a good platform to start from, to start creating awesome chunked out layouts you can share with the community. If you have any feedback on this process, or you find any quirks or things that don't work quite as you'd expect in this system, definitely comment on this video or reach out to me through nexusmods.com or the simsettlements.com forums. Anyway, you've got available, and I would be happy to tweak and expand this system and make sure that it covers as many bases as possible so that you guys can get those layouts out to players so they come out exactly how you envision them.